I never imagined I would stand in my identical twin sister's place on her wedding day. Melira had begged me that morning, her voice shaking through the phone. She was sick, violently ill, and couldn't make it to the chapel on time. The ceremony was in 2 hours. Our parents would be devastated. Beckett Rainsford, her groom, would be humiliated. I hesitated. But Melira's desperation broke through my resistance. We looked exactly alike, down to the small mole beneath our left ears. No one would know, I agreed, telling myself it was just for the ceremony. I would slip away before the reception, and Melira would take over once she recovered. I drove to the venue, my hands gripping the steering wheel too tightly. The silk gown she'd left for me fit perfectly. As I adjusted the veil in the bridal suite, my reflection stared back at me, foreign yet familiar. I took a deep breath and stepped into the role of my sister. The chapel was breathtaking, filled with white roses and soft candlelight. Guests turned as the music began, and I walked down the aisle alone, my father having already taken his seat. Beckett stood at the altar, tall and confident in his tailored suit. His dark eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment I thought he knew. My heart pounded, but I kept my composure. When I reached him, he took my hand gently. Then he leaned close, his lips nearly brushing my ear. His voice was a whisper, low and deliberate. I didn't know she had a twin. "You're perfect," my stomach dropped. The word perfect echoed in my mind. Sharp and wrong, he wasn't supposed to know I wasn't Melira. Yet his tone suggested something else entirely. Something calculated. I forced a smile. My mind racing, what did he mean? The officiant began speaking, but I barely heard the words. Beckett's gaze never left my face, and I realized this night would demand more than my presence. The vows passed in a blur. I repeated the words mechanically, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Beckett's hand was warm against mine, but his grip felt possessive, almost threatening, when the officiant pronounced us husband and wife. Beckett kissed me briefly, his lips cold. The guests erupted in applause, and I walked back down the aisle on his arm, my smile fixed in place. At the reception, I searched for a moment to call Melira, but Beckett stayed close, his hand always on my lower back. He introduced me to relatives and business partners, his charm effortless, yet every time we were alone for even a second, his demeanor shifted. He watched me too closely, his eyes calculating. During dinner, he leaned in again, his voice low. "You're handling this well, better than I expected." My blood turned to ice. He knew. Somehow, Beckett Rainsford knew I wasn't my sister, and he was playing along. I excused myself to the restroom, my legs shaking as I walked. Inside, I locked the door and pulled out my phone. I called Melira, but it went straight to voicemail. Panic clawed at my chest. What was happening? I tried again, then sent a frantic text. "Beckett knows, call me immediately." I stared at the screen, waiting, but no response came. When I returned to the reception, Beckett was speaking with my father near the bar. I caught the tail end of their conversation. "She'll never see it coming," Beckett said, his tone casual. My father laughed, oblivious. I felt my knees weaken. What was Beckett planning? And why was my father complicit? Even unknowingly, I moved closer, pretending to adjust my dress. But Beckett noticed me immediately. He smiled, that same cold smile, and extended his hand. "Dance with me." "Darling," I had no choice but to accept. As we swayed on the dance floor, his grip on my waist tightened. "You're wondering what I meant," he murmured. I kept my expression neutral, refusing to give him satisfaction. "I don't know what you're talking about." Beckett chuckled softly, his breath warm against my temple. "Of course you do, you're too smart to play dumb." Eris, hearing my real name from his lips was like a slap. He knew everything. My mind raced, calculating my next move. I couldn't run. That would only confirm his suspicions and escalate whatever game he was playing. I had to stay calm, think clearly. "What do you want?" I asked quietly, my voice barely audible over the music. Beckett pulled back slightly, his eyes searching mine. "I want you to keep playing along. Melira can't give me what I need, but you can." My confusion must have shown because he smiled again, this time with genuine amusement. "You'll understand soon enough." The song ended, and he released me. Disappearing into the crowd, I stood frozen on the dance floor, my heart hammering against my ribs. I needed answers. I slipped away from the reception, wandering through the sprawling mansion where the event was held. The old estate had countless rooms, and I found myself in a long hallway lined with portraits. At the end was a heavy wooden door. Slightly ajar, I pushed it open and stepped inside. It was a library, shelves filled with leather-bound books. A single lamp illuminated a mahogany desk in the center. On it sat an envelope with Melira's name written in elegant script. My hands trembled as I picked it up and opened it. Inside were legal documents, insurance policies, and financial statements. My breath caught. Beckett had insured Melira's life for millions of dollars, and I was listed as the contingent beneficiary. My mind reeled. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a setup. Beckett intended to replace Melira with me, and the insurance policy was his safety net. I heard footsteps behind me and spun around. Beckett stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You found it," he said simply. Closing the door behind him, I clutched the envelope. My knuckles white. "What is this?" He crossed the room slowly, his hands in his pockets. "Insurance, a precaution. Melira was never going to survive this marriage. Heiress, she's too weak, too trusting. But you're different, smarter. Stronger, that's why I needed you here." My stomach turned. "You're insane." Beckett laughed, a low, chilling sound. "No, I'm practical. Melira's death will look like an accident. You'll inherit everything and we'll split it. 50-50, all you have to do is keep pretending." I shook my head, backing toward the door. "I'll never help you." He stepped closer. His eyes cold. "You already are. You walked down that aisle, said those vows. In the eyes of everyone here. You're Mrs. Rainsford now, and if you try to expose me, I'll destroy you and Melira both." I forced myself to stay calm, to think logically. Panic would only give Beckett more power. "You're bluffing," I said, though my voice wavered. He smiled. "Am I? I have recordings of you agreeing to the charade. Texts from Melira begging you to take her place. If this goes public, you'll both be implicated in fraud. No one will believe you." He was right. I had no proof of his intentions. Only this envelope. I needed leverage. Something to turn the tables. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Beckett tilted his head. "Studying me? Because I think you're smart enough to see the benefits. Play along and you'll walk away rich. Fight me and you'll lose everything." Before I could respond, the library door opened. A woman stepped inside, tall and elegant with dark hair streaked with silver. Her sharp eyes assessed me immediately. "You must be heiress," she said coolly. Beckett's jaw tightened. "Viviette, what are you doing here?" Viviette Caro ignored Beckett. Her gaze fixed on me. "You're in danger. Beckett Rainsford is a predator, and you're his latest target." Beckett moved toward her, but she raised a hand. "Don't. I've been tracking your schemes for months. You think you're clever, but you're sloppy. And now you've involved an innocent woman." My mind spun. Who was this woman? And could I trust her? Viviette turned to me. "I knew your sister. She came to me weeks ago." Terrified, she suspected Beckett was hiding something. But she didn't know what. I told her to call off the wedding. But she wouldn't listen. Now she's gone. My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "Gone?" Viviette's expression softened. "Melira didn't get sick this morning. Heiress, she disappeared." Beckett made sure of it. I looked at Beckett, horror flooding through me. "What did you do to her?" He didn't answer. But his silence was confirmation enough. Viviette stepped closer. "We need to leave now." I wanted to run, to scream, but my legs wouldn't move. Beckett stood between us and the door. His expression dark. "You're not going anywhere," he said quietly. Viviette didn't flinch. "You can't keep us here. People know where I am. If I don't check in within the hour, they'll come looking." Beckett hesitated. And in that moment, Viviette grabbed my arm and pulled me toward a side exit I hadn't noticed. We ran through the mansion's back corridors, my dress tangling around my legs. Behind us, I heard Beckett shouting orders to someone. We burst out into the garden, the cool night air hitting my face. Viviette led me to a car parked near the edge of the property. "Get in," she commanded. I obeyed, my hands shaking as we sped away. I looked back at the mansion, its lights glowing warmly against the darkness. Somewhere inside, my sister was missing, and I had just escaped a man who wanted me dead. Viviette drove in silence, her jaw set. I finally found my voice. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe. I have a place outside the city." I stared out the window, my thoughts a chaotic mess. "How do you know Beckett?" Viviette's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "He destroyed my cousin's life 5 years ago. Same pattern, marriage, insurance fraud. Then a convenient accident. She died before anyone could prove what he'd done. I've been watching him ever since, waiting for him to slip up." My stomach twisted. "And Melira?" Viviette's expression was grim. "I don't know, but if she's alive, We need to find her before Beckett does. We arrived at a small cabin an hour later. Hidden deep in the woods, inside, Viviette handed me a change of clothes and made coffee. I sat on the worn couch, trying to process everything. What do we do now? I asked. Viviette pulled out a laptop. We build a case, every transaction, every lie, every person he's hurt, and we expose him. Over the next few days, Viviette and I worked tirelessly. She had files on Beckett going back years, including financial records, witness statements, and photographs. I contributed everything I'd learned at the wedding, including the insurance documents and the recordings from the library. Viviette had installed a hidden camera in the chapel weeks earlier, anticipating Beckett would reveal something incriminating. The footage captured his confession to me in the library. It wasn't enough to convict him, but it was a start. I tried calling Melira's phone repeatedly, but it remained off. I filed a missing persons report, though the police seemed skeptical. She's an adult, the officer said. Maybe she just needed space. I wanted to scream. Melira wouldn't just disappear. Beckett had done something to her, and I was determined to prove it. Late one night, Viviette received a tip from one of her contacts. Beckett had been seen at a remote property he owned upstate. We packed immediately and left before dawn. The property was an old farmhouse, isolated and overgrown. We parked a distance away and approached on foot, the early morning mist clinging to the ground. Viviette moved silently, her experience evident. I followed closely, my heart pounding. Through a grimy window, I saw movement inside. A woman sat at a table, her head in her hands. My breath caught. It was Melira. She looked thin and exhausted, but alive. Relief flooded through me. Viviette signaled for me to stay quiet. We circled the house, looking for a way in. The back door was unlocked, and we slipped inside. Melira looked up, her eyes widening. Eris, I rushed to her, pulling her into my arms. Are you okay? Did he hurt you? She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. He locked me here, said I had to stay until after the wedding. He threatened to hurt you if I didn't cooperate. Rage burned through me. Beckett had manipulated us both. We didn't have much time. Viviette urged us to leave quickly. But Melira was weak. She'd barely eaten in days. I helped her to the car, and we drove back to the cabin. Once there, Melira told us everything. Beckett had been planning this for months. He'd courted her, convinced her to marry him, then slowly isolated her from friends and family. When she started asking questions about his finances, he panicked. He orchestrated her illness on the wedding day, knowing I would step in. His plan was to kill Melira and frame it as an accident, then marry me legally once the dust settled. The insurance payout would fund his lifestyle, and I would be none the wiser until it was too late. Melira's hands trembled as she spoke. I'm so sorry, Eris. I should have listened to you when you said something felt off about him. I held her hand tightly. It's not your fault. He's a monster, but we're going to stop him. With Melira safe, we focused on building an airtight case. Viviette contacted a lawyer she trusted, someone who specialized in fraud and abuse cases. We compiled every piece of evidence, the insurance documents, the recordings, witness testimonies from people Beckett had scammed before, and Melira's account of her captivity. The lawyer was confident we had enough to pursue criminal charges. We also reached out to a journalist who'd been investigating Beckett for a separate story. She was eager to help, promising to publish everything once the legal proceedings began. But Beckett wasn't going to go down quietly. One evening, Viviette's phone rang. It was an unknown number. She answered cautiously. Putting it on speaker, Beckett's voice filled the room. Smooth and menacing. I know you have Melira. Bring her back, or I'll make sure both of you regret it. Viviette's expression didn't change. You're finished, Rainsford. The authorities have everything. He laughed coldly. We'll see about that. The line went dead. The next morning, we received word that Beckett had been arrested. The police had acted on our evidence, executing a warrant at his home. They found more incriminating documents, including plans to flee the country. Beckett was charged with fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, unlawful confinement, and a dozen other crimes. The news spread quickly, and the media descended. Melira and I stayed hidden, refusing interviews. We wanted justice, not publicity. At Beckett's arraignment, I sat in the back of the courtroom with Melira and Viviette. Beckett entered in handcuffs, his confident demeanor replaced with barely concealed fury. When his eyes found mine, I didn't look away. I wanted him to see that he hadn't broken us. The judge denied bail, citing Beckett as a flight risk. As he was led out, he turned back one last time, his lips forming a single word, perfect. I felt nothing, no fear, no anger, just cold satisfaction. The trial took months to prepare. Beckett's lawyers tried every tactic to discredit us, but the evidence was overwhelming. Viviette's testimony about her cousin's death opened the floodgates, and more victims came forward. Women Beckett had manipulated, scammed, and abused over the years. Each story was heartbreaking, but together they painted a picture of a serial predator. When it was my turn to testify, I recounted everything calmly and clearly. The defense attorney tried to rattle me, suggesting I had fabricated the story for attention or money. I didn't take the bait, I simply presented the facts, letting the evidence speak for itself. Melira's testimony was equally powerful. She described her captivity, the fear, the manipulation. By the time she finished, several jurors were wiping their eyes. The prosecution rested, confident in their case. Beckett took the stand in his own defense. A risky move, he was smooth, charismatic, insisting he'd been framed, but under cross-examination, he cracked, his arrogance betrayed him. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the courtroom was silent. The foreman stood, and the judge asked for the verdict. Guilty on all counts, relief washed over me. So intense it was almost painful. Melira squeezed my hand, tears streaming down her face. Viviette nodded, her expression grim but satisfied. Beckett's face turned ashen. He stared at the jury in disbelief. Then at me. I met his gaze evenly, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing me gloat. The judge set a sentencing date for 2 weeks later. As Beckett was led away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't over yet, but we'd won the most important battle. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us, but we declined to comment. Melira and I walked to Viviette's car in silence, the late afternoon sun warm on our faces. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Sentencing day arrived. The courtroom was packed with victims, their families, and media. The judge listened to impact statements, including one from Melira. She spoke about the trauma, the nightmares, the betrayal. She spoke about the strength it took to rebuild her life. When she finished, the judge turned to Beckett. Mr. Rainsford, you have shown a pattern of manipulation, deceit, and cruelty. You targeted vulnerable women for financial gain, with no regard for their lives or dignity. This court finds your actions reprehensible. The judge sentenced him to 30 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for 15. Beckett's face remained blank, but I saw the defeat in his eyes. As he was escorted out, he didn't look at anyone. He was nothing now, just another criminal paying for his crimes. Melira and I left the courthouse together. Hand in hand, Viviette joined us, and we went to a quiet cafe to decompress. It's really over, Melira said softly. I nodded. Yes, it's over. Months later, life began to feel normal again. Melira started therapy and slowly rebuilt her confidence. She moved in with me for a while, and we grew closer than we'd ever been. Viviette remained a friend, her work continuing to protect others from predators like Beckett. I thought often about that night at the wedding, when I'd stood in Melira's place and heard those chilling words. It had set everything in motion, but it had also revealed a strength I didn't know I had. I'd faced a monster and won, not through violence or recklessness, but through patience, intelligence, and sheer determination. One evening, Melira and I sat on my porch, watching the sunset. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything. I smiled. You would have done the same for me. She nodded, and we sat in comfortable silence. The past would always be part of us, but it didn't define us. We'd survived, and that was enough. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a deep sense of peace. Justice had been served, and we were free. Looking back, I realized that life rarely hands us justice on a silver platter. Sometimes it asks us to act with courage, wit, and patience, and to protect those we love, even when it means stepping into someone else's shoes. I saved my sister from a life she didn't deserve, and in the process, I discovered strength in myself I never knew existed. The groom thought he could hide his lies behind charm and words. He learned too late that truth has a way of catching up, and I made sure it did. My sister is safe, the deceit has been exposed, and justice, in its own quiet way, has been served. Life will always bring betrayal, but it also gives us choices, and sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply ensuring the ones we love never have to suffer. That is the only victory that truly matters. Now to the lovely viewers of this channel. Got a story? Let's tell it together. Here on this channel, your voice matters. If you have a personal story, a revenge moment, a betrayal twist, or even an idea that you think would make our narratives sharper, more emotional, or more entertaining, share it with us. Tell us what themes you want more of. What twists keep you hooked? What parts of our stories hit you the hardest? Or what you'd love to hear next? Drop your thoughts, stories, and suggestions in the comments below. Let's build this amazing community together, one powerful story at a time. Your story could be the next one featured. Don't be shy, we're listening. And we would always respond. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.